speaking about openness and feedback, Basil Hewitt, Senior Engineer from the LA County Sanitation District, is here to talk to us and give us a presentation about chloride. So let's give Basil a big hand. Come on, guys.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm Basil Hewitt, and I'm also here with Frank Guerrero. He's a senior engineer in the district's monitoring department. And I'm here to give you an update on the chloride compliance facility plan that the sanitation district, the Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District, has to implement to comply with strict federal and state requirements for chloride discharged from our 2 wastewater treatment plants of the Santa Clara River. And so I'm going to give you an update on that schedule, and I really want to get your input, get your feedback, so I'm here to listen as well. So as we go along, if you have questions on particular slides, just jump in at that point, and then I'll also take questions after about 17 or 18 slides. So this is a conversation more than anything else. First thing, I'll start with who the sanitation districts are. We're not the city of LA, we're not the county of Los Angeles. They're in Los Angeles County, there are 10 million people. We provide the wastewater conveyance, treatment, and reclamation services for 5.4 million people that live in 78 of the 88 cities. And a lot of times I tend to sanitize this. Sewage, that's the stuff that goes out of the toilets, that comes out of the stuff, as gross as you could imagine. That's what goes into our now 11 wastewater treatment plants. We treat 450 million gallons per day of wastewater. That's enough to fill the Rose Bowl 4 or 5 times a day with that substance. And we have about 1,400 miles of trunk sewer. These are large diameter, 8-foot, 10-foot, 12-foot diameter trunk sewer throughout all the county. But the neat thing about the sanitation districts, you see this area that shows we've now grown to be 23 sanitation districts. As far north as Antelope Valley, we have 2. We have one here in Santa Clarita that we're talking about here tonight. And we have 17 down here in this part of Los Angeles County. But the neat thing is that we get the economy of scale, we get the buying power of a large agency, but we have local control. Because each of these sanitation districts, 23 sanitation districts, has an independent board of directors made up of the elected officials within that sanitation district. I'm getting used to this divide. And so, for example, for the Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District, you see outlined here, it's mainly the city of Santa Clarita, but you also have adjacent areas unincorporated Los Angeles County. So the board of directors for this district are 2 members of the city council for the city of Santa Clarita, as well as a representative from LA County Board of Supervisors. The Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District, and if you have any questions, just jump in if I'm losing you. Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District treats the wastewater for 250,000 people. In this district, you have about 38 miles of trunk sewer. Those aren't the sewers that leave your home or business. Those laterals that leave your home or business tie into our sewers, trunk sewers, which are like the major arteries that take the wastewater to one of our 2 wastewater treatment plants in the Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District. One plant is the Saugus plant that you see here. This can treat up to 6 million gallons per day of wastewater. It's treating about 5 million gallons now. Can you make that out? Okay, come on down, as Bob Barker would say. And then we have the Valencia water reclamation plant. This treatment plant can treat up to 21 million gallons per day, and right now it's treating about 15 million gallons per day. Both of these plants were built in the early 60s before this chloride issue had really bubbled to the surface, before the federal government and the state started giving us the strict chloride compliance limit. So they're producing 20 million gallons per day of highly treated water. This is water that is potable for reuse, and it's pretty close to its drinking water standard. It's very, very close. And I just wanted to step you through kind of a quick schematic. The water comes into homes. People use it for different functions. Local sewer, then the trunk sewer, then to our treatment plant. And it goes through a couple of steps of treatment. We have the initial step, is what we call primary treatment. Let the wastewater come in, and by gravity, those solid materials settled out. Then you have stuff still left in the wastewater. And that's colloidal particles that won't sink out, microorganisms that you would find in a lake or a river. We have a bunch of them in these tanks. They eat that. They create colonies. They settle out. So what nature would do, and in old days we didn't have that many people in the area, the oceans and rivers can handle. We're doing in the treatment plant. We're speeding up this process so we can clean up this water and put it back in our environment. And then it goes through disinfection and chlorine. And out here, our water is discharged to the river if it's not reused. We're a leader in reuse. Right now, throughout the sanitation districts, we have over 650 reuse sites. But this is one of our sanitation districts. We want to ramp up the reuse. We're really reusing less than 0.5%, and it goes to a local golf course and a green belt there. But we'd like to see more because this is, we see this as part of our future. So the water is discharged to the river, and that's where the problem starts. The state has mandated that we have to meet a 100 milligrams per liter level for water discharge from our both treatment plants to the Saugus, from the Saugus and Valencia treatment plant to the Santa Clara River. These treatment plants function real well, but our standards, the water that we're discharging to the river exceeds that standard. And in May of last year, the regional board sent us a letter threatening significant fines unless we comply with this 100 milligrams per liter. And so we're in a position where unless we comply, we could face significant fines that ultimately would be paid for by the property owners. Because the way the districts works, we don't have a tax. We have what we call a sewage service charge. So if you use our system, you pay your proportionate share to clean up the water. If you're on septic tank, for example, you pay nothing. So ultimately, all these costs are borne by property owners within our sanitation districts. First question, thank you.
Basil, what other city in this whole network that you were talking about receive letters like this?
Within our sanitation districts?
Yes.
We do a great job in terms of treating the wastewater. We've won a number of awards, but we've had issues with the regional board in the Antelope Valley. In the Palmdale and Lancaster area, we were fined substantial sums of money and had to build a project and pay the fine on top of it. And what made those two, go ahead.
But currently only Santa Clarita is exceeding those standards? Long Beach and Whittier and all the rest are all within compliance? Is that?
The difference between, and maybe I should back up, the difference between, okay. This slide gives you, people accuse me of simplifying things too much, but the difference between these 17 districts and the districts we have up here, these districts are interconnected with a whole bunch of sewers. And what we've done here, we have about 7 treatment plants within this area. We have the largest one down in Carson. You see how close we are in the ocean? Well, one of our first chief engineer came back from Ohio, and he had expertise in tunneling. And what he did, he started building, he built a 6-mile-long tunnel from Carson out to San Pedro area. And then we have 4 ocean outfalls that are at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean that go 1.5 miles. And what it does, it takes water that's too salty for reuse and puts it out there. One of the problems we're dealing with here and here, we're far from the ocean.
So in other words, we're not really doing anything wrong. We're just living like everyone else lives in the other 17 districts, except that we don't have an outfall directly into the ocean.
Yeah,
and now we're going to be punished for that? Is that what I'm gathering? We're going to be fined or taxed, or we have to build more plants because the people in Ventura County want to grow strawberries instead of citrus?
It's not quite like that. They
I
felt.
simplify things too.
Yeah, that's good. What they said is that the standard should be 100 milligrams per liter for the uses of that water to protect all the stakeholders. And one of the uses is agriculture. But that's not, and so the standard was there before, yeah. It's really, they thought it was needed to protect the stakeholders. When we wanted, and maybe I'll go to the next slide. There's another question. And the other slide will just, Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, what is the federal mandate?
The federal, it's basically coming from the Clean Water Act, and the Clean Water Act down to the state and with the Regional Water Quality Control Board to protect different water bodies depending on the use, and that's where it's translated to this total maximum daily load, and it's translated into about 100 milligrams per liter of chlorides that the state is mandated to us that we need to remove.
But
it's coming from the Clean Water Act.
But
Frank,
Basil,
is there any,
Basil, there is no limit in the Clean Water Act.
I'm not specific.
There's no limit in the Clean Water. The Clean Water Act states that we have to get a permit to put any of these chemicals into a navigable waterway, but doesn't specify any limits as far as like 100 milligrams per liter of salt or whatever.
Frank, you want to add anything to that? Grab the mic, Frank.
The water quality objective for Clarita, 230 milligrams.
At the federal level?
Yes, that's the federal criteria.
Okay. But you know, one thing that you said that it just dawned on me, I hadn't thought about this at all before. If Santa Clarita hooked up to the joint outfall system,
There you go.
and just put all of the output of the water treatment plants into that system, then we wouldn't necessarily need to do RO at all.
Thank you very much.
I think it's not as simple. There's certain requirements that we have to put water in the river that we still have to meet, and those issues will be addressed in the draft EIR and the facility plan. Frank seems to, you want to add something to that, Frank? You do.
So, like Basil was saying, we are looking for brine disposal to connect to the joint outfall system because they do already have an outfall. As far as discharging all of our water, there are issues with having discharged for so long that habitat's been created. So the resource agencies, Fish and Wildlife and Department of Fish and Game, have jurisdiction over the habitat essentially. So if we were to want to eliminate our discharge, that would also have to be permitted, and there's no indication that that would be allowed.
There goes our fishing.
The stickleback.
Okay. What percentage of the problem is a result of importing water, salty water from the Delta up in Sacramento?
I have a slide that gives you rough breakdown of the chlorides.
Okay. Another question is, what is the implication of using gray water at your home rather than putting it into the system legally, and how would it affect the sewage treatment?
The gray water answer is, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the requirements are in gray water. We're tasked to handle the water, the sewage that comes into our pipe. Yeah, you probably can do gray water, but I would have to look into what those are. Do you know anything about that, Frank?
No, I'm not familiar with the regulations for gray water. I know there's something that they're trying to get in the state and in LA County. As far as the impact, it would be water from like rinse cycles and things like that is what I understand gray water would essentially be. So the majority of the chloride load from human use and soaps and laundry detergents would still end up in the sewer system. So I imagine it would not directly address that chloride problem.
And then he had a second question. Let me get to a second question. This schematic kind of quickly shows you, this is just a rough schematic in terms of Imported water, we're saying, it's just a schematic. It's really a range, but we've simplified it. It ranges probably between 40 and 85, but we've used, for example, say, 65 milligrams per liter chloride could come in the imported water, local water supply, groundwater 65, and then industry and homes would add another 45 milligrams per liter. Anytime humans use water, we're going to add salt on it, no matter where you live and what you do. And then when it comes to our treatment plant, we disinfect using chlorine. It's a really good product to disinfect, kill those microorganisms that would create problems for us. But one of the byproducts is chloride, and so that adds another 10 milligrams. So using this simple schematic, you could wind up with around 120, 130, which is above the standard coming out. So you can see 65, and I have, so 65. So 65 from groundwater, so and I have percentages like 45, 50% from that. Does that, any other questions?
Yes. My question is this, because I'm laboring on a different set of information than what you're relaying. First of all, Regional Water Board is a body of non-elected people, none of which live in our area. And please correct me at any point where I'm wrong. The basis for that 100 milligrams is set by that Regional Water Board, and every different Regional Water Board throughout the state seems to have a different standard. Am I also correct? I believe I am.
I'll turn it to Frank.
Well, I'm not quite done yet, Frank,
okay.
So let me finish up. So if this is a non-elected bunch of people, none of whom are from our area, who decide arbitrarily based upon a study of a study, it's not even an actual study that was done in that particular region, Fillmore, Santa Paula, wherever, actually looking at the water, looking at the crops, and looking at whether or not there is or is not any beneficial or detrimental effects, then how, in good conscience, because can anyone expect us to spend millions of dollars to cure a problem which may not, in fact, even exist?
Before Frank chimes in, I just want to say something. We've been advocating since 1989 for a different limit. Since 1989, we've been advocating for 140 milligrams per liter and so on. We've done our level best to advocate for that limit. We've been rejected in our advocacy of that limit. Right now, as I see it, we're at a fork in the road. Either we do something or we face fines, severe fine, and potentially even losing local control of that sanitation district. That's my take. Frank, you can get into the specifics of the study if you want.
I was just going to talk a little bit to the water quality standards. There's a bit of misinformation as far as how the standards were set. The standards were set, as Basil said, according to the Clean Water Act in the 1970s. The Clean Water Act requires the state to identify, to develop a basin plan for each basin in the state, which essentially identifies the beneficial uses of each groundwater basin and the water quality of those basins, and to protect that moving forward. So the water quality objectives of 100 that we're talking about were set in the 1975 timeframe to protect the existing water quality at the time and to identify the uses that exist or could potentially exist and protect those. Where we come to, we're protecting agriculture, is that in order for the regional board to raise that standard, they have to look at the impacts on all uses, beneficial uses, and the beneficial use that's limiting here is agriculture, specifically the salt-sensitive crops. So they have found, based on these studies, which, like you said, it was a literature review of studies, but not arbitrary studies. It was done by expert consultant in the field to look at studies that were applicable for the region, the climate, the water quality. But it wasn't site-specific. It wasn't site-specific, but these were studies that they deemed, and then in their expert opinion, that were applicable for the region. We also asked for information on what studies could be done at the same time locally, what kind of field studies. The response when they came back with the literature results of these studies that they deemed appropriate, the regional board felt they had enough information to base their decision on to not change the standard. It was a consultant retained by the Sanitation District, CH2M Health. I think I got it.
Another question? How are you doing, Cam?
I think what we really have to do is bring it back to the political arena, because that's what I keep hearing from the Sanitation District, is that, well, you have your board. Well, our board is made up, at least at the last hearing, just I believe it was May 9th, that we had to go down to Whittier in order to find out what our local board was doing. The directors that I have on that agenda are Frank Ferry, Lorene West, and Yaroslavsky for the county. Now, Yaroslavsky wasn't there, but Antonovich, who is the alternate, and they have him as the chairperson, was there. West was there, and McLean was there. Now, every time I've talked to the Sanitation District, and you've had 23 years, you knew about this for 23 years, there should have been some planning as to meeting that requirement. And the only thing I've ever seen when I go downtown for hearings before the county, where is the Sanitation District head? Where do they sit? Right next to the developers. And they're right up there testifying everything's fine. Now, I find that a little strange that at the last hearings, when everyone protested here, they said they weren't going to raise the rates. Then very quietly they came back and said, we're raising them for 3 years, but it has nothing to do with the chloride. If you went down to this meeting, if you went down there 60 miles to Whittier, it's right in their agenda packet here. They were saying the 3-year service rate last year was intended only to support the continued operation and maintenance of the existing sewers, plumbing plants, and water reclamation plants in the most cost-efficient means available. What they were saying is it was intended. Then you go into the next line, with the exception of work being performed at the direction of the board. So there's your, if you go through all of this, you find it comes back to the board to develop a chloride management facility plan and an outreach program for the community. None of the 3-year rate increase has been budgeted for the development of facilities to control chlorides in the Santa Clara River. What they have allocated is $21 million to do the EIR and the design. So this is the board, your elected officials again, that are approving this. And if you go through the scenario here that is being presented through all the years, you will again see that the board makes these decisions that says, no, we're going to adhere to the 100. And I find it very strange that the Sanitation District and the board are also responsible for adding 6,000 homes of the Newhall Ranch into the district. Interesting enough, from your own presentation here, that is exactly 6,000 that you're saying the Valencia plant can accommodate. Now, is that just a coincidence, or do we go to the board? Or
At what point do I respond to any of the? Can I respond? The first comment you made, Ms. Noltemeyer, you said we should have done something, I think, by 1989. Our mission is to protect public health and the environment in the most cost-effective way. So our first thing is public health and the environment. And Al had asked me earlier about whether this water protects human life and health. And I would say yes. And we're trying to do it in the most cost-effective way. And so we tried, and that's why we didn't do it in 1989. We were advocating. Are you telling me we should have spent that money right away when they roll over when they told us it was 100 milligrams? That's what I thought I heard you say.
You should have started putting the money aside for it.
Is that what I heard? Yeah, I totally disagree. Part of our responsibility is trying to do it in the most cost-effective way. All right, and the second, with a 3-year rate increase, our board said they only wanted to pay for O&M. That's a fact. In terms of the money, all I can say is that the regional board wants us to do something. We have to do something, or we could face severe fines for not complying. So we had to at least start moving in that direction. And that's all I could say. As regards to Newhall, I have no information. I can't connect the dots on that.
Can I just suggest that you continue with your presentation?
I'm almost done.
Then we can ask questions at the end.
I like, because then I don't want people to hear me drone on. I don't like my voice.
We just need to
All right, in 1989, this is when the district, the state regulator said, here's your limit, 100 milligrams per liter, 1989. That's over 20 years ago. Regional board, we said to them, look, the water supply has a lot of chlorides in it. Why are you coming down so hard on us? Then we advocate for 143. We're saying, oh, come on, this is 143 be fine. We do what we need to do. We save a lot of money. They said no. They rejected that. In 2002, on behalf of the ratepayers, we appealed both the chloride limit as well as the schedule. I mean, these are actions we've been doing, trying to advocate, and battery must have died. And then, as we realized our advocacy, our argument for these points weren't getting much traction, we started looking, okay, if you can't change the limit, let's look at source control. And that's when this automatic water softener removal and ban and rebate program went into effect, because we wanted a parallel track to have another way to try to meet this issue in the most cost-effective manner. And then in 2006, we appealed their decision again. 2008, we provided evidence to support a higher limit and we had additional negotiation. Again, we were rebuffed. And then 2010, 2011, we supported the city of Santa Clarita's effort to try to seek legislative relief and while working at lowest cost option, which we're always doing. And then we're in 2011, we got that letter. You do something or you're going to face fines. It's been a long time. We've been talking about this issue. What are you going to do? We're at that fork in the road. We can argue about whether that 100 milligrams per liter, and we argued it pretty aggressively, but we're at this point. They said do something or. This is just quickly shows you some of the impacts of the source control. This is a poster we use with our water softener program. It's pretty hard to see here, but bottom line, since 2005, through the rebate program, we've taken out almost 8,000 water softeners. What you've seen is a reduction. Like on this slide, you can see that water softeners were about 30% of the chloride problem, and we've gone from 30%, 33% to about 5% of the chloride concentration. And we've seen between the water softener program as well as change in the water supply, a reduction from 178 roughly to about 128, 130. We're still not there yet. And this go ahead, Al.
Just for a minute. I don't know if you know the answer to this. There was discussion at one time. In our sanitation district, we take wastewater from pitches. And there was discussions about their water softeners at pitches detention. Have they all been removed as well?
They have all been removed. I'm almost certain. I think I remember that question coming up a couple of years ago, and they do not have water softeners.
Okay.
This is the detention facility.
All right. Would you check that for me, please? Yeah.
This is the
we wouldn't
detention.
we wouldn't want the criminals to get chaffed,
Salt's the least of our problems getting sent down the sewer. So you'd be amazed what we pull out of the sewer. Well,
Yes, I was just wondering if there's been any attempt at state legislation to do a study that would actually detail the needs of the area and adjust the levels accordingly, and or legislation that would require the developers in that area to assume responsibility for a portion of the building of those. CM2 Hill, CH2ML Hill works a lot with the developers here. I've read through a lot of the EIRs locally. They they participate in most of them. There's an article in the LA Times today where they are advising a group who are trying to sell water from the Mojave Desert, saying that no, the aquifer. So, you know, it's a little bit questionable sometimes what their advice is and who they're working for. And that's why I'm suggesting maybe if there's legislation, or if we can get legislation going at the state level so that we can have more of a level playing field.
I'll just, I think studies have been done. Maybe you don't like to say. I know that legislative relief has been attempted by the city and so on. And Frank wants to add some additional comments to that. Just, we need a Donahue going through the aisle to get Frank the mic.
Just a little more information on those studies. We did do the study by CH2M Hill, but you're not the only one who didn't trust them. The Ventura stakeholders didn't trust them, and the regional board didn't trust them. So there was actually a technical advisory panel that was assembled of experts in the field, from academics, from agricultural organizations, and it's questionable, you know, who they represent to, but you know, these were recognized experts in the field. So they reviewed all the work, and they're the ones who actually, I guess, approved the results of what's a protective range that the regional board is saying they have enough information. As far as other studies that could be done, again, at the same time that they were doing this evaluation of existing studies, they were to provide recommendations on studies that could be done in the field here in the area. Once the regional board had the results, like I said, they felt they had sufficient information to move forward with their limits. They felt that they could not justify raising the standards as a result of that. So they basically shortened the schedule and said they're moving forward, and they would have allowed us to do the studies, and they would have considered it and maybe made a change. And if you ask my kids, if I tell them maybe, my son will say, that really means no. So those studies, what we could do, were looked at. As far as legislation, I think Basil talked about working with the city. I don't know that that legislation went anywhere.
Okay, so essentially then they still rejected the more specific studies that would have...
Yes, we asked for the time to do them, and the response we got was, you can do them, but we have enough information, we feel, to justify our standards.
You want to say that again? No, that's fine. All right. Okay, another question in the back. I just have a couple more slides, Al. I'll be done by 8:30.
My question is, I'm listening to everybody talk, and it seems to me as though the problem begins with the state and ends with the state. It's the state regional quality board that is requiring that we meet these numbers. It is the state that we buy our imported water from that already has quite a bit of chloride. Any thought given to actually suing the state because they're selling us water that already has a lot of sodium chloride in it?
Yes. That's all I was saying. But yes, that's a short answer. But I think that's where, yeah, Frank, yes, but that's not within our purview. I mean,
I would say that's kind of one argument that the district presented, was that the imported water was a significant source. I think at the time the state board's position was no one's forcing you to take that water. And there's no...
Oh, yes.
Can we refuse it?
As far as... And then talking to water quality, imported water right now is actually at 50 milligrams per liter. Groundwater is higher than that. So right now, your imported water is lower. So it is, as Basil said, a range. I think he's going to talk about it right now. There's a range of values of imported water and groundwater. It's not a constant number. The imported water is not always higher.
And right now, groundwater
and the
is higher.
groundwater sometimes is higher.